Man, I moved to Detroit. I haven't been in Kalamazoo in about I've been in Kalamazoo in about it's been about 10 years, man. I moved to Detroit. I ended up meeting this chick named Renee. She was a cool chick. Um we met online and we were kind of going back and forth. She was coming to Kalamazoo for a minute and she was a cool chick. And I ended up moving with her. She's lives in Southfield, and I ended up moving with her. And I don't know. It seemed pretty cool and everything. And don't get me wrong, she was a cool chick, and it seemed cool because I was living in Kalamazoo for so long, and I was living at 1801 Crown Street, and that was my mom's house. And it got kind of weird, for a minute, because I was living there, and then she was having issues with my nephew, and I let my nephew move in because I was trying to get somebody in the house, even though I'm a tenant. I don't own the house, but I was doing some work on the house and everything, and there was some tension between me and my mom because of the fact that I'm a tenant and I don't own the house. And she was acting kind of funny and everything, but I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I just, just did what I had to do and just kind of said, I'll figure it out one way or another. And I don't know. I kind of looked at it as when I met Renee, it was kind of like my escape from all of that to get out from under all that stuff. And then, I moved, and she still got me on the hook with this house. But I've been in Southfield, and we were living on Southfield Road, and she was cool and everything, and she had a pretty good job. She was working at DTE. She was a substation operator right out of high school and everything, and now she's I think she's like a buyer or something like that. So, I moved there, and I was working at a scrapyard, and they give you all kind of overtime or whatever. So, that's pretty cool and everything. So, it was a bit of a come up, and I got my car and everything. I'm welding, coming back and forth from Detroit every other weekend, because I still get Jasmine every other weekend, and we would shoot to Kalamazoo, and she would go see her grandmother, and I come to Kalamazoo, hang out for a minute or whatever. I think when I was coming to Kalamazoo, I think you were married. I think you were living in Detroit. I remember. But I saw you there one time in Myers and everything. I think that was your brother I saw you with. And I was doing that, and I had some family issues. And, my nephew, he was kind of in his feelings or whatever. Me and him ended up getting into it. And I had to cut him off and everything, because he was just, just something else, and it got real ugly. And I said, I got to cut you off, man, because you want something different, and I guess he called himself taking something from me, I guess, because even though I have, I got my two daughters, And I was constantly thinking about him. You know, does he need a car? Does he need someplace to stay? Yada, yada, yada. And then he just kind of turned on me. And then I was pretty pissed. And I was like, I want my car back. And he was like, no, I ain't giving you nothing. I was like, okay, dude, it's easier for me to let that hoopty go than to do something that I regret for the rest of my life. Only because, the repercussions that would come after it. So after that, I kind of end up getting a divorce. Because my wife, I never thought about it. My ex-wife, she was a Gemini, and she was a cool chick. Don't get me wrong, Geminis are cool, but the thing about Geminis is that Geminis are only good with other Geminis. Geminis, they get on everybody else. They get on your nerves. She was cool, real successful. You know what I'm saying? I definitely ain't mad at her or nothing like that. But I don't know. I noticed a pattern when I was with her, and I noticed that I would get my check, and everything was all good, until she did a mental calculation in her head, and she could tell that I didn't have enough money to go anywhere, and that's when she would kind of flip the script and be like, well, if you don't like it, leave. This, that, and the other. And then finally, I looked at the situation when she did that like every other weekend. So I kept looking at the situation, I analyzed it, and then I made a decision. The last time she did it, I told her I want a divorce. I said, yeah, because I'm not going to do this. And we ended up getting a divorce, and her mother, was all in her business. Like, I think my mom, she used to always tell me that single parents, those are kind of the worst people you can date, because you're dating them and their parent, because their parent is just so much in their business. And, sometimes I can't blame them because they may be in an abusive relationship or whatever. But my ex-wife, her mom, how you going to give somebody advice and you've been divorced 3 times? Get somewhere and sit down, please. So I end up getting a divorce from her, and end up moving, and that was crazy. I'm moving my stuff out, and I tell her, I'll be back tomorrow to get the last box, and she's gonna tell me the doors will be locked. I looked at her like, are you serious? So I said, okay. Got my box, went on about my business, and started my life. I ended up moving not too far from her. She's on I'm not sure if she lives there still or not. I really don't know. But she lived on Southfield Road. I'm in Telegraph and 12 Mile. So she used to love going to Myers. Myers is right across the way from me. But, she was like, thought Myers was just the Louis Vuitton grocery store or something. I don't know. But that's where I live at, right across the street from that Myers. And after I moved, she was calling me for a while. I was kind of like, what do you keep calling me for? She called me and asked me, what you doing, where you living, where you working, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, none of your business, because it was just weird for you. You're my ex-wife and you calling me, questioning me about all this stuff. You know what I'm saying? But after that, I've had a couple of other jobs too. I had a job at a place that made automotive racks. because I left the scrapyard due to COVID, and then I was chilling. Like I said, I was working all that overtime, so I had a little money put back. So I was at home chilling during COVID, and then I ended up getting a job at this other place called Argus. They make automotive racks for like Ford or whoever. So I ended up leaving there because I went to the railroad. That was a disaster because, you know, I didn't realize how much of a headache the railroad is and how much confusion and drama was at the railroad. And, you really don't make that much money working for the railroad, because working for the railroad, I think you might make maybe seven a week, seven to 11 every week, but you get paid every 2 weeks. So it's like 15 to 23 every 2 weeks or whatever. So that was cool, but it was some experience. And the way that I got in there was because I had worked with the scrapyard. So my experience from there, working outside, heavy equipment, this, that, and other, then that qualified me to work for the railroad. So then I worked for the railroad for a little while, and it was cool, but they, this Detroit, and these people act truly funny, and I got the boss cussing me out, talking stuff, and, these rednecks, they own some different stuff, one dude talking about, don't make him go out in his glove box, and I'm like, yeah, this is nuts, because I'm from Kalamazoo, they don't really do all that. They didn't used to. It wasn't that serious, but now I'm in the D. Now I got to step my game up a little bit. And the boss, he was talking all crazy and all that kind of stuff, and the mess with you're on the radio and you got to talk to the yard master and the person you're working with, and it's a mess. It really is. It's definitely a mess. But eventually with that, I just got sick of it and said, I can't do this, and I left. But I was already doing ride share too with it. So what I did was I said, okay, I'll just leave the railroad and I'll just go work for myself. So I did ride share for about 5 years, maybe. It was either 5 or 7, somewhere in there. And I did pretty good with ride share, even though you really don't make money doing ride share. But I did pretty good. While I was working for the railroad, real quick. While I was working for the railroad, I saved up like $10,000. So I ended up buying a Mustang. It's a 2021 convertible Mustang with black stripes in it, loaded, everything. Nice car. But I did that while I was working for rideshare. And to be honest, I did okay with rideshare for all those years because I wasn't doing the math. I was just kind of going with the flow, kind of looking at what I was bringing in. So I really wasn't paying any attention to anything else, just what I was bringing in. And I would pay my taxes, pay this, pay that, and just keep it moving, and really never did the math. And I did it for a little while. I got kicked off of Uber. Then I started doing Lyft, got kicked off of Lyft. And right at that the last time, I had already been looking for jobs and everything to get off of it, but that last time I got a call back, and that was when I said, oh, it must be time for me to go, and I just set it down. And that was when I did the math, and come to find out, not making any money. I made $135,000 one year, but my after expenses, I only made $8,000. So that was, a ripoff. Especially, this Detroit. So you got to deal with all these crazy folks, and you're trying to navigate through all of that drama, and it's a mess. It really is. But I did it for a while, and then I got out of that, and then the last couple months though, I just been kind of job hopping, because I ended up doing a kind of a self-evaluation, and getting my mental all together and everything, so I'm not tripping emotionally and not feeding in the, how these people be. I'm just not gonna feed in all that stuff. I'm kind of done with that. But I was job hopping, and I went to Amazon. I did that for a minute and gave it up, because it was like they start you off, you're doing, whatever they want to call it. They call them nursery routes. We start off doing 120 stops. So I was like, okay, I can do this. Then all of a sudden it jumps up to, 140. I'm like, okay, this, what is this? Then all of a sudden it jumps up to 170. And it's like, what are we doing here? So, with that and all of the stuff that come with it, and I was like, I'm not doing this. So I ended up leaving there. I went to another railcar place, and I was a railcar mechanic there. So when I went there, I was only there for like a month, because it was a bunch of drama there. But the good thing about that place is I went there and I learned how to take a rail car apart, the wheels and all this other stuff. And then when they pissed me off, I went and applied for this other place that's in Ypsilanti. We're kind of on Michigan, right up the street from Amazon. So when they called me, then I went to the interview, and the railcar mechanic experience that I had gotten from the previous job is helping me over here. This job, plus my welding experience, is helping me on that too. So this new job that I have, that job is much easier than the one before. It still has some things that the one before had, but it's not as crucial as the one before. This is like a lighter version of the old job, so that makes it that makes it a little bit better. I mean, all these jobs pay better than back when I was in Kalamazoo. You can get jobs better. The job market is much better. Much more places to work. If you can't find a job here, you must not want one. But I'm there now, and that's pretty good. That's 6 to 2 Monday through Friday, no weekends. Which is rare here. Kalamazoo, that's all day long. But here in Detroit, weekends off is like, they looking at you like, what? You want weekends off? And everything is a hustle. Everything is a hustle. But it's kind of like you moving and shaking, around here. But overall, life has been treating me pretty good. I really can't complain. I mean, I went from, that place in Kalamazoo where I was working at, welding at Root Springs Scraper. I don't know. I was kind of struggling there, or whatever. And now, I'm kind of living out the life that I wanted. Got me a nice car, making a payment on that. Got money in the bank. Got, good credit. Got this, got that. And that's pretty good. My daughters, I can when they own something that I agree with, positive, then I'll send them a little money, whatever. So everybody doing pretty good. Can't beat it. And I've been really, like I said before, I've been really working on myself. So, I'm proud of that. I've been doing the mental work on myself. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what a lot of people don't do. They don't do the mental work. They just sit up here and, they go back and forth. You meet some fine chick, whatever. She meet a fine dude, whatever, and y'all good, but it's like, neither one of y'all, understand yourself. So your relationship is held together. Y'all held together by emotion, So, that's something I've been working on myself. I'm pretty proud of that. And in my free time, I've been doing my podcast. I dumped like, I dumped like 5,000. Well, not 5,000. About 3,000 in that. So that's a hobby that I'm doing. Just kind of doing stuff in my free time. And I got a booth and all that kind of stuff, mics and professional gear and hardware and stuff. So I'm working on that. I started doing it because I was doing YouTube, and I was doing, trying to make, videos or whatever, and trying to get something to work, because I'm tired of working. I want to retire. But I finally gave in and started podcasting. That's why I created that in the first place, because I was always thinking about podcasting, but I had never did it. And then, because I didn't really give it too much credit, you know what I'm saying? So when I finally decided to, go ahead and podcast, then I was like, okay, let me jump in it. And I, you can say I dove in that head first, so that was cool. I don't know. I think the hardest part of, when you're trying to build something, I don't know. The hardest part, man, is just doing the work on yourself and just being in the right place mentally so that you can skate through the rest, because if you ain't right mentally, it's going to be rough, because you're you trying to, I don't know. I don't think that you have the right, I don't think you have everything in order, and you don't understand everything when you're trying to build. You don't understand what it takes to build stuff. When you're trying to build something, you got to be right. You gotta understand, how to love yourself, how to put yourself first. You got to understand, how to be content so you can, build over here and not be stressed out. You got to understand, how to be happy so you can build stuff and you still doing what makes you happy. And you got to understand peace. You know what I'm saying? So everybody else ain't, you're not surrounded by drama and nonsense, so you gotta, that's the hardest part about that. Just being mentally in order and doing the work on yourself, and I think something I learned about myself was just I wasn't in the right place. But I also learned that, I'm, what I'm saying, me, I've always been, ambitious and always, trying to make it, always trying to get more, always. I mean, I always look back, I look back from where I was. I look back at Kalamazoo and now, and it's like, a totally different person almost. Totally different person. I went from, comfortable and scared to jumping off that cliff and, spread my wings in the city. I mean, if you can survive in the city, you can survive anywhere. Because you learn how to move, and you learn how to make moves that keep you moving forward. You feel me? And you learn how to, make moves that you may not like sometimes. Sometimes you gotta make this move. And then you got to sit back and kind of, say, okay, let me make this move, and then I'll kind of make this move here, work this overtime, then I'll save up a little bit, and that'll give me a little bit of breathing room. So when I make this other move, and it's just in the city, you just, you bobbing and weaving, you making moves in the city, because I don't know. I'm not going to say I didn't believe. I didn't believe in success when I was younger, because I always wanted to make money. I just didn't, I'm not going to say I didn't believe it. I just didn't understand it, And I wish I could tell, if I could tell my younger self something, it would be invest in Bitcoin instead of all that other stuff, because it really didn't matter. If I had invested in Bitcoin, I ain't gonna say I'd be rich, but I'd have came out better than I'm doing now. And I think people have always misunderstood my growth. People have always misunderstood my grind, and always had a hatred for me, man, for some reason, because I don't know, people say that I give off, they claim this whole thing where people give off bad energy, but I don't really get it. How you can go, over somebody's house with a friend. You got people you don't even know got their nose turned up at you, and you just met them. That, in my understanding, that's not me. That's them. That ain't got nothing to do with my energy. My energy is good. I don't even know you. But your energy is off. So you have a misunderstanding of me and what I'm in front of you for. I'm in front of you because your cousin or your friend, somebody that knows you, brought me with them. I'm not in front of you, trying to date you, trying to talk to you, trying to nothing. I'm in front of you because the person brought me with them. And that was just, that's I think that's what people misunderstand about me. And I kind of think at the end of the day, I get tired and frustrated a lot, but I think what keeps me going is, if I quit, who cares? You can quit if you want to, but, there ain't nobody coming to save you. So, that's just not something that, it's not something that I really focus on. I don't really focus on quitting, because nobody's there to save you. Nobody cares. And it's, you kind of have to remember that. It's like, I think that people that do care, I think they're not spending enough time on themselves. If you care about somebody else's win or loss, because that means you focused on them. You know what I'm saying? I mean, don't get me wrong. I used to be that person. I used to be a hater. Oh, he got a car and he do this, he think he all that, yada, 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 yada. I used to be that kind of person. Used to be that exact person. I say that up front. But now, no, that ain't happening. I ain't even cut like that no more. My whole full day is all about me. You feel me? It's all about me. All about what I'm doing. It's all about I'm intentional about being better tomorrow than I am today. I'm intentional about, still, climbing towards that goal. I'm intentional about, my podcast. I'm intentional about my peace. I'm intentional about loving myself. I'm intentional about, my health. I'm intentional about what I eat. I'm intentional about, my the things that I like to do. So, that's my thing. I live my life with a purpose. I live my life with intention. You know what I'm saying? If you can't explain it, I don't know what to tell you. Everybody out here talking about they, doing this with a purpose and all this other stuff. And you can ask any one of them, now, what do love mean? Blank page, because half of them don't know. You feel me? They run around talking about I love you. They hang on for a minute till the other person say I love you too. Then they good. Like, bro, we ain't in high school no more. You know what I'm saying? Understand what somebody telling you and understand what you telling somebody else, because it's not about what you're saying. It's about you understanding what you're saying. You feel me? Your word is your bond. Understand what you're telling me. Understand, what you mean when you say you love me. Because I'm gonna ask you, okay, what do you mean by that? Because I want to understand and I need you to understand. We ain't in high school. I ain't waiting on you to just, to echo, I love you too. Oh, okay, I'm good. We just said I love you back and forth, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? It has absolutely no meaning, if you don't know what it means. Like a fart in the wind. Don't mean nothing. So when you say something, know what you're saying. Sit down for a minute and ask yourself, what do this mean? What do I mean when this, that, and the other? You know what I'm saying? Do the work on yourself. You know what I'm saying? Appreciate you listening. I'll holler at you in the next episode.